In the heart of Illinois, nestled amidst rolling hills and verdant fields, lay the idyllic town of Oak Ridge. It was a place where time seemed to slow down, where the rhythm of life was dictated by the gentle sway of porch swings and the comforting aroma of freshly baked bread. The townsfolk knew each other by name, strangers were a rarity, and the changing seasons were heralded by Mrs. Patterson's wind chimes, their melodies as reliable as any weather forecast. As autumn descended upon Oak Ridge, painting the landscape, in vibrant hues of red and gold, a mysterious figure appeared. It was a white cat, or rather, what had once been white. His fur was now matted with dirt, a testament to the long and arduous journey he had undertaken. His amber eyes, though striking, held a deep wariness, hinting at the hardships he had endured. He moved with a slight limp, a silent acknowledgement of past injuries, and he kept to the shadows, observing the townspeople from a distance. Eliza Morgan, the warm-hearted owner of the corner cafe, was the first to notice his arrival. For 30 years, she had been the heart of Oak Ridge, her cafe a gathering place for locals, her pastries a source of comfort and delight. One crisp October morning, as she arranged her freshly baked goods by the window, she spotted the cat, slinking across the town square. "Well, aren't you a sight?" she murmured, her voice filled with a mixture of pity and curiosity. Reaching for a piece of ham from her sandwich, she stepped outside, extending the offering towards the wary creature. "Here, kitty," she coaxed gently. The cat's reaction was not what she expected. He didn't hiss, nor did he bolt away in fear. Instead, he simply stared at her, his ears flattened slightly, his expression conveying not aggression, but a profound sorrow that tugged at Eliza's heartstrings. Then, with a quiet dignity, he turned and walked towards the gazebo at the center of the square, his tail hanging low. News of the white cat spread through Oak Ridge like wildfire. In a town where most animals were beloved pets, this stray was an anomaly. The townsfolk, known for their kindness and community spirit, were quick to offer assistance. Tom Wheeler, the owner of the hardware store, a man with a gruff exterior but a soft heart, placed a saucer of water near the gazebo steps. "Poor thing looks half-starved," he remarked, his voice laced with concern. The cat watched him from a safe distance, waiting until Tom retreated before cautiously approaching to drink. Helen Barnes, the third-grade teacher at Oak Ridge Elementary, tried a different approach, offering a can of tuna with a gentle smile. "My Tommy at home would love a friend," she said softly, keeping her distance as the cat ate with a nervous haste. "Would you like a nice warm bed?" she offered, her voice filled with warmth. The cat finished his meal, met her gaze with those haunting amber eyes, and then retreated back under the gazebo, seeking the solace of shadows. Day after day, the people of Oak Ridge extended their hands in friendship, offering food, water, and gentle words. Children, their hearts full of innocent curiosity, were warned not to approach too closely. Not because the cat was perceived as dangerous, but because there was an air of self-respect about him, a sense of wounded dignity that commanded a certain distance. It was Eliza who finally bestowed a name upon the mysterious creature. Standing at her cafe window, she watched as the cat groomed himself in a rare patch of sunlight. "Clove," she said aloud, the name forming on her lips as she observed his faded white fur. "He reminds me of the dried white cloves I use in my apple pies," she mused. Once bright and fresh, now faded, but still carrying something special inside. The name resonated with the townspeople, capturing the essence of the enigmatic feline. "Clove," they whispered, the name passing from neighbor to neighbor like a gentle breeze. Clove, the cat who came from nowhere. Clove, who accepted food but never affection. Clove, who seemed to be waiting for something or someone. Unbeknownst to the residents of Oak Ridge, 20 miles away in a small blue house with white shutters, a young girl named Ivy Lee Mason was preparing for her first day at Oak Ridge Elementary. Her small suitcase was packed with care, her beloved teddy bear tucked safely inside. On top of her neatly folded clothes rested a photograph of her mother, her smile radiant as she held a tiny white kitten. Ivy Lee had been silent for 2 years, her voice seemingly lost after a tragic accident. Doctors called it selective mutism, a condition brought on by deep trauma. Her grandparents, Margaret and Emery Mason, knew it simply as heartbreak, a wound that time seemed unable to heal. "Time to go, sweetheart," Margaret called gently up the stairs, her voice filled with a tenderness that belied her own sorrow. "Your grandfather has the car ready." In her small bedroom, adorned with yellow wallpaper, Ivy Lee cast one last glance at the stars painted on her ceiling. They were no ordinary stars. Her mother had insisted on painting them herself, even in the late stages of pregnancy. "So our baby will always have wishes to make," she had said, her voice filled with love and hope. Now, those stars were the only remaining connection to a life that felt distant and dreamlike. As Ivy Lee climbed into her grandfather's old station wagon, the autumn wind picked up, swirling leaves and carrying secrets through the streets of Oak Ridge. And under the town gazebo, Clove lifted his head, his ears twitching as if he were listening to a voice carried on the wind, a voice only he could hear. What did this mysterious cat know? What was the purpose of his arrival in Oak Ridge? As the town settled in for another peaceful night, these questions hung in the air, unanswered. Little did the residents of Oak Ridge know that the arrival of this one small animal was about to change everything, especially for a little girl who had forgotten how to speak. Margaret and Emery Mason's house stood at the end of Maple Street, a grand 2-story Victorian with a wraparound porch that exuded old-world charm. The garden, once a vibrant tapestry of colours, now showed signs of neglect, its flowers untended, its beauty faded. The paint on the porch rails was chipping away, revealing the passage of time and the weight of grief that hung heavy in the air. Ivy Lee's small feet dragged with reluctance as she walked up the path to her new school. Her dark brown hair, neatly brushed and tied with a ribbon that matched her blue dress, framed a face that held an old sadness. Her grandmother, clinging to the familiar, still believed in the importance of appearances, a way of maintaining order in a world that had become chaotic. "Now remember what Dr. Williams said," Margaret whispered, kneeling to straighten Ivy Lee's collar, her voice filled with a gentle encouragement. "You don't have to talk if you don't want to. Mrs. Barnes knows, and she'll help you with the other children." Ivy Lee nodded, her eyes fixed on some distant point, her small hand clutching a notebook, her constant companion and a bridge to a world where words had become too painful. "I'll be right here at 3 o'clock, Margaret promised, pressing a kiss to her granddaughter's forehead, her heart aching with a love that words could not express. It had been 2 long years since the accident, 2 years since their daughter Sarah's car had skidded off the road during a thunderstorm, 2 years since they had opened their door to find a police officer and a silent, shocked child. As Ivy Lee stepped into the classroom, she felt the weight of 20 pairs of eyes upon her. The other children stared, their curiosity piqued by the arrival of a new student, especially one shrouded in such quiet mystery. News of the little girl who didn't speak had already spread through Oak Ridge, whispered between adults who often underestimated the keen ears of children. "This is Ivy Lee Mason," Mrs. Barnes announced with forced cheerfulness, her voice attempting to mask the awkwardness of the situation. "She's joining us from Springfield, and I want you all to make her feel welcome." 20 curious faces turned towards Ivy Lee, their expressions ranging from innocent curiosity to blatant fascination. She clutched her notebook tighter, seeking solace in its familiar pages. "You can sit here next to Lily," Mrs. Barnes said, gesturing to an empty desk beside a girl with blonde pigtails and a kind smile. Throughout the morning, the children made tentative efforts to include Ivy Lee in their games and conversations. Lily showed her the class pet, a fluffy hamster named Mr. Whiskers. Bobby offered to share his colourful pencils, his gesture awkward but well-meaning. Emma passed her a note, her handwriting loopy and enthusiastic, inviting Ivy Lee to play jump rope during recess. Ivy Lee responded with small nods or shakes of her head, her communication limited to the brief, precise sentences she wrote in her notebook. Her handwriting was remarkably neat for a 7-year-old, a testament to the countless hours she had spent expressing herself through the written word. During lunch, Ivy Lee sat alone at the end of a long table, methodically consuming the sandwich her grandmother had lovingly prepared. She remained oblivious to the shoom and laughter that filled the cafeteria, her mind drifting to a different time and place. In her thoughts, she was seated in a sun-drenched lunchroom, her mother across from her, carefully cutting the crusts off her bread and making silly faces to elicit a giggle. "Does she really not talk at all?" a boy whispered loudly, his voice carrying across the crowded room. "My mum says it's because of what happened to her mum," came the hushed reply. "Says some things are too sad for words." Ivy Lee's grip tightened on her sandwich, but her face remained impassive, a mask of carefully constructed indifference. She had learned to build walls around her emotions, to contain them like water behind a dam, fearing that any release might unleash a torrent of grief. After school, Margaret was waiting, her smile warm and encouraging. "How was your day, sweetheart?" she asked, taking Ivy Lee's backpack, her voice gentle and hopeful. Ivy Lee remained silent, her gaze fixed on the colourful leaves swirling in the autumn wind. Margaret sighed softly, understanding her granddaughter's reluctance to speak. "Well, we can talk about it later," she said, her voice filled with a gentle understanding. "Let's go home and have some of Grandma's apple pie. It might make everything seem a little brighter." As they walked hand in hand down Main Street, Ivy Lee's attention was drawn to the town square. Under the gazebo, nestled amidst the fallen leaves, was the white cat. He was grooming himself meticulously, his movements slow and deliberate, his amber eyes fixed on some unseen point in the distance. A strange sensation washed over Ivy Lee, a pull, an inexplicable connection that resonated deep within her quiet heart. She stopped abruptly, her small hand slipping from her grandmother's grasp. "Ivy Lee," Margaret called, her voice filled with surprise. "Where are you going, dear?" Without a word, Ivy Lee began to walk towards the gazebo. Margaret watched, her brow furrowed with concern, unsure of what to do. She had never seen her granddaughter show interest in any animal before. As Ivy Lee approached, Clove stopped grooming and turned his head, his gaze meeting hers. There was no fear in his eyes, no wariness, only a quiet recognition, as if he had been expecting her. Ivy Lee knelt slowly, her notebook clutched tightly in her hands. She extended a hesitant hand towards the cat, her movements gentle and cautious. Clove didn't flinch. He remained still, his amber eyes never leaving hers. For a long moment, there was only silence, broken only by the rustling of leaves and the distant chime of Mrs. Patterson's wind chimes. Then, slowly, tentatively, Clove took a step forward. He rubbed his head against Ivy Lee's outstretched hand, a soft purr rumbling in his chest. Margaret gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. In all the weeks that Clove had been in Oak Ridge, he had never allowed anyone to touch him. He had accepted food and water, but any attempt at affection had been met with a swift retreat. "Well, I'll be," Tom Wheeler muttered, having witnessed the encounter from his hardware store across the square. "That cat's got a mind of his own, that's for sure." Eliza Morgan, who had also seen the exchange from her cafe window, felt a lump form in her throat. There was something profoundly moving about the connection between the silent child and the wary cat, a shared understanding that transcended words. From that day forward, Ivy Lee's visits to the gazebo became a daily ritual. After school, she would rush to the town square, her notebook tucked safely in her backpack. She would sit quietly with Clove, sometimes reading aloud from her favourite books, sometimes simply watching him as he napped in the afternoon sun. Clove, in turn, seemed to anticipate her arrival. He would wait for her under the gazebo, his tail twitching with anticipation. He would follow her as she walked around the square, his presence a silent comfort. He would even allow her to brush his fur, his purrs growing louder with each gentle stroke. The people of Oak Ridge watched with a mixture of awe and wonder. They had never seen Clove so affectionate, so trusting. It was as if Ivy Lee possessed a magic touch, a secret language that only the two of them understood. "It's like they're soulmates," Helen Barnes mused one afternoon as she observed Ivy Lee and Clove from her classroom window. Two wounded souls finding solace in each other. Margaret and Emery were overjoyed by the change in Ivy Lee. For the first time since the accident, they saw a spark of joy in her eyes, a flicker of life in her quiet demeanour. Clove had brought a light back into their granddaughter's world, a light they feared had been extinguished forever. "It's a miracle," Margaret whispered to Emery one evening, as they watched Ivy Lee and Clove through the living room window. "That cat has given our Ivy Lee something we couldn't." Emery nodded, his eyes filled with gratitude. "Sometimes," he said softly, "healing comes from the most unexpected places." However, their newfound peace was soon to be disrupted. One crisp autumn morning, as Ivy Lee prepared for school, Margaret found a flyer tacked to their front door. It was a picture of a white cat, identical to Clove, with the words "Lost Cat" printed in bold letters. Below the picture was an address in a neighbouring town, 20 miles away. Margaret's heart sank. She knew what she had to do, but the thought of taking Clove away from Ivy Lee filled her with dread. She had seen the profound impact the cat had on her granddaughter, the way he had coaxed her out of her shell of silence. "What's wrong, Grandma?" Ivy Lee asked, her voice a soft whisper, her eyes filled with concern. Margaret had taught her a few basic signs, and Ivy Lee often used a combination of signing and writing in her notebook to communicate. Margaret hesitated, unsure of how to break the news. She showed Ivy Lee the flyer, her hand trembling slightly. Ivy Lee's eyes widened, her face paling. She looked from the flyer to her grandmother, her expression a mixture of confusion and fear. "He has a home," she wrote in her notebook, her handwriting shaky. Margaret nodded sadly. "It seems so, dear. We have to call the number on the flyer. It's the right thing to do." Ivy Lee's shoulders slumped. She looked towards the window where Clove was curled up on the porch swing, basking in the morning sun. The thought of losing him was unbearable. The call was made, and a woman's voice, filled with relief and gratitude, answered. Her name was Sarah, and she confirmed that the cat in the picture was indeed her beloved companion, Snowball. He had gone missing several weeks ago, and she had been searching for him tirelessly. Sarah promised to come to Oak Ridge the following day to collect Snowball. Margaret hung up the phone, her heart heavy with sadness. She knew that reuniting Snowball with his owner was the right thing to do, but she couldn't help but feel a pang of guilt. That night, Ivy Lee barely touched her dinner. She sat by the window, watching Clove as he chased fireflies in the garden. Her notebook lay open on her lap, filled with sketches of the white cat, each drawing capturing a different facet of his personality. Margaret sat beside her, her arm around her granddaughter's shoulders. "Oh, Ivy Lee," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "I know this is hard, but we have to be happy for Snowball. He's going home." Ivy Lee nodded slowly, her eyes filled with unshed tears. She understood, but understanding didn't make the pain any less real. The next day dawned bright and clear, the autumn leaves shimmering in the morning light. Sarah arrived in the early afternoon, her car a small, beat-up sedan, her face etched with a mixture of hope and exhaustion. As she stepped out of the car, Clove, who had been napping on the porch, lifted his head and stared at her, his ears twitching. A low meow escaped his lips, a sound that was both questioning and tentative. Sarah's eyes widened. "Snowball?" she whispered, her voice filled with disbelief. Clove hesitated for a moment. Then, with a burst of speed, he ran towards Sarah, weaving between her legs, rubbing against her ankles. Sarah knelt down, her hands trembling as she stroked his fur. Tears streamed down her face as she buried her face in his neck. "Oh, Snowball, my Snowball," she sobbed, her voice choked with emotion. "I thought I'd lost you forever." Ivy Lee watched from the porch, her heart aching with a mixture of joy and sorrow. She was happy that Snowball was finally going home, but the thought of saying goodbye filled her with a profound sadness. Sarah stood up, holding Snowball in her arms. She turned to Ivy Lee, her eyes filled with gratitude. "Thank you," she said, her voice hoarse. "Thank you for taking care of him. I don't know how to repay you." Ivy Lee shook her head, her gaze fixed on Snowball. She walked slowly towards Sarah, her notebook clutched in her hand. She opened it to a page filled with drawings of Snowball and handed it to Sarah. Sarah looked at the drawings, her eyes widening with surprise. "They're beautiful," she whispered, her voice filled with awe. "You're very talented." Ivy Lee offered a small smile, her heart swelling with a bittersweet emotion. She reached out and gently stroked Snowball's fur one last time, her touch lingering. "Goodbye, Snowball," she wrote in her notebook, her handwriting neat and precise. "I'll miss you." Snowball looked up at Ivy Lee, his amber eyes filled with a soft understanding. He let out a quiet meow, a sound that seemed to say, "Goodbye, my friend." Sarah thanked them again, her voice thick with emotion, and then she climbed back into her car, Snowball nestled safely in her lap. As the car drove away, Ivy Lee stood on the porch, watching until it disappeared from sight. A single tear rolled down her cheek, a silent testament to the bond she had shared with the white cat. Margaret wrapped her arm around her granddaughter, her heart aching with empathy. "It's okay to be sad, sweetheart," she whispered, her voice filled with love. "But remember the joy that Snowball brought into our lives. That's something no one can ever take away." Ivy Lee nodded, her gaze fixed on the empty space where Snowball had once been. The autumn wind picked up, swirling leaves around her feet, carrying with it a whisper of sadness and a hint of hope. That night, as Ivy Lee lay in bed, she couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to Snowball's story, a mystery that remained unsolved. Why had he come to Oak Ridge? Why had he chosen her? And why, despite finding his way back home, did she feel a lingering sense of unease? Little did she know that the answers to her questions lay hidden in the heart of Oak Ridge, waiting to be revealed like secrets buried beneath the fallen leaves, and that the journey to uncover those secrets would lead her on an adventure far beyond her wildest imagination. The days that followed Snowball's departure were quiet and subdued in the Mason household. Ivy Lee's visits to the town square became less frequent, her notebook filled with sketches of other things, anything but the white cat. Margaret and Emery tried their best to fill the void, but the absence of Snowball's comforting presence was palpable. One afternoon, while browsing through the dusty shelves of the Oak Ridge Library, Ivy Lee stumbled upon an old book tucked away in a forgotten corner. Its cover was faded and worn, its title barely legible. Oak Ridge, a History. Intrigued, she carefully pulled it from the shelf and carried it to a quiet table near the window. As she turned the fragile pages, she was transported back in time. The book chronicled the town's origins, its early settlers, and the events that had shaped its character. There were tales of hardship and triumph, of love and loss, of ordinary people living extraordinary lives. One particular story caught Ivy Lee's attention. It was a legend passed down through generations, a tale of a white cat who had appeared during a time of great sorrow in Oak Ridge. The cat, according to the legend, possessed a unique ability to sense grief and offer solace to those in need. He would stay with them until their hearts began to heal, and then, just as mysteriously as he had arrived, he would disappear. Ivy Lee's heart pounded in her chest. Could Snowball be connected to this legend? Was it possible that his appearance in Oak Ridge was more than just a coincidence? Driven by a newfound curiosity, Ivy Lee delved deeper into the book, searching for any clues that might shed light on Snowball's origins. She discovered old photographs of Oak Ridge, images of a town that looked both familiar and strangely different. There were pictures of the town square, the gazebo, and even the very house she now lived in. One photograph in particular made her breath catch in her throat. It was a picture of a young woman standing in front of the Mason house, her smile radiant, her arms wrapped around a small white kitten. The woman's face was strikingly familiar. It was her mother, Sarah, and the kitten. It was Snowball. Ivy Lee's mind raced. Could it be possible? Had Snowball been her mother's cat? Had he somehow found his way back to Oak Ridge, drawn by an invisible thread of love and memory? The more she thought about it, the more it made sense. Snowball's connection with her, his familiarity with the Mason house, his almost uncanny ability to sense her sadness. It all pointed to a deeper connection than she had initially realized. Determined to uncover the truth, Ivy Lee embarked on a quest to piece together Snowball's past. She visited the Oak Ridge Historical Society, a small museum housed in an old schoolhouse, where she met Mrs. Abigail Thompson, a kind and knowledgeable woman who had lived in Oak Ridge her entire life. Mrs. Thompson was delighted to assist Ivy Lee in her search. She shared stories of Sarah Mason, a bright and spirited young woman who had been deeply loved by the community. She spoke of Sarah's love for animals, particularly her white kitten, Snowball, who had been her constant companion. Sarah found Snowball as a stray, Mrs. Thompson recounted, her eyes twinkling with fond memories. He was just a tiny thing, abandoned and alone. But Sarah took him in and nursed him back to health. They were inseparable. Mrs. Thompson also revealed that Sarah had been deeply involved in the local animal shelter, dedicating her time and energy to rescuing and caring for abandoned animals. It was there that she had met her husband, David, a veterinarian with a passion for helping creatures great and small. As Ivy Lee listened to Mrs. Thompson's stories, a vivid picture of her mother began to emerge. She saw Sarah not just as a grieving mother, but as a compassionate and selfless individual who had touched the lives of many. With each new piece of information, Ivy Lee felt a growing sense of connection to Snowball and her mother. It was as if the white cat had been sent to her as a messenger from the past, a tangible link to a love that transcended time and loss. Her quest for answers led her to the old Mason family attic, a dusty and cluttered space filled with forgotten treasures. Among the stacks of old boxes and trunks, she discovered a collection of Sarah's journals, their pages filled with her thoughts, dreams, and memories. Ivy Lee spent hours poring over the journals, her heart aching with each entry. She read about Sarah's hopes for the future, her love for David, and her unwavering devotion to Snowball. She learned about the day Sarah had found Snowball, a tiny, shivering ball of fur abandoned in a cardboard box behind the animal shelter. She read about their adventures together, their quiet moments of companionship, and the unconditional love they shared. In one entry, Sarah wrote about a legend she had heard about a white cat who brought comfort to those in sorrow. She wondered if the legend was true, if such a creature could really exist. Ivy Lee's breath caught in her throat as she read her mother's words, her mind filled with a sense of wonder and disbelief. As she continued to read, she discovered a hidden compartment in one of the journals. Inside, she found a small, intricately carved wooden box. With trembling hands, she opened it. Nestled within the box was a delicate silver locket. Ivy Lee carefully lifted it out and opened it. Inside, there were two tiny photographs. One was of Sarah, her smile radiant, her eyes filled with love. The other was of Snowball, his amber eyes gazing directly at the camera, his expression both wise and playful. Ivy Lee gasped, her heart overflowing with emotion. She clutched the locket tightly in her hand, feeling a profound connection to her mother and Snowball. It was as if they were both there with her, their love surrounding her like a warm embrace. With the locket in her possession, Ivy Lee felt a renewed sense of purpose. She knew that she had to find a way to bring Snowball back to Oak Ridge, not just for herself, but for her grandparents, for the town, and for the memory of her mother. But how could she convince Sarah to part with her beloved companion? What could she say to persuade her that Snowball belonged in Oak Ridge, that he had a special purpose to fulfill? As the autumn leaves continued to fall, blanketing Oak Ridge in a tapestry of gold and crimson. Ivy Lee pondered these questions, her mind filled with determination and hope. She knew that the journey ahead would be challenging, but she was prepared to face whatever obstacles lay in her path. For she had discovered that the bonds of love were stronger than time and distance, and that the whispers of the past could guide her towards a future filled with healing and hope. Ivy Lee knew that convincing Sarah to part with Snowball would be a delicate and challenging task. She decided to approach it with honesty and heartfelt sincerity, hoping that her mother's love for her would outweigh her own attachment to the cat. With the silver locket tucked safely in her backpack, Ivy Lee asked her grandparents if they would drive her to Sarah's house. Margaret and Emery, although hesitant at first, agreed to support their granddaughter in her quest. They understood the depth of Ivy Lee's feelings for Snowball and the importance of this journey to her healing process. The drive to Sarah's house was filled with a mixture of anticipation and apprehension. Ivy Lee gazed out the window, watching the landscape change from the familiar rolling hills of Oak Ridge to the more bustling outskirts of Springfield. She clutched her notebook tightly, rehearsing in her mind what she would say to her mother. As they approached Sarah's house, Ivy Lee's heart began to pound. The small blue house with white shutters, the same house from the photograph in the library book, came into view. It looked both welcoming and strangely forlorn, as if it were waiting for something to bring it back to life. Margaret parked the car, and the three of them stepped out. Ivy Lee took a deep breath, trying to steady her nerves. She walked up the path to the front door, her grandparents following close behind. Sarah answered the door, her eyes widening in surprise as she recognized Ivy Lee and her grandparents. "Ivy Lee," she said softly, her voice filled with a mixture of confusion and joy. "What a wonderful surprise." Ivy Lee offered a small smile, her gaze fixed on her mother's face. She could see the resemblance to the photographs in the locket, the same gentle eyes, the same warm smile. "We came to talk to you about Snowball," Margaret said gently, her voice breaking the awkward silence. Sarah's expression changed. A shadow of sadness crossed her face as she looked down at the white cat, who was curled up at her feet. "Of course," she said quietly. "Please come in." They stepped inside, the house filled with a quiet warmth. Sarah led them to the living room, where they sat on a comfortable sofa. Snowball followed them, his amber eyes darting curiously around the room. Ivy Lee took a deep breath and opened her backpack. She carefully chewed the silver locket and handed it to her mother. Sarah's eyes widened as she recognized the locket, a gift from her own mother many years ago. She opened it, her gaze softening as she looked at the photographs inside. "Oh, Ivy Lee," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "Where did you find this?" Ivy Lee wrote in her notebook, her handwriting neat and precise. "I found it in the attic. It's beautiful." Sarah smiled, her fingers tracing the outline of her mother's face in the photograph. "It was my most prized possession," she said softly. "And Snowball. He was my most cherished companion." Ivy Lee nodded, her eyes meeting her mother's. She took a deep breath and wrote again. "We know that Snowball is special to you, but he's also special to Oak Ridge. He's helped me. He's helped my grandparents. He's helped the whole town." Sarah's brow furrowed in confusion. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice filled with curiosity. Ivy Lee turned the pages of her notebook, revealing the sketches she had made of Snowball. She showed her mother the drawings of Snowball in the town square, under the gazebo, surrounded by the autumn leaves. She showed her the drawings of Snowball with her grandparents, bringing them comfort and joy. Sarah's eyes widened as she looked at the drawings. She could see the connection between Ivy Lee and Snowball, the unspoken bond that had formed between them. "He's like a messenger," Ivy Lee wrote, her handwriting filled with passion. "He came to Oak Ridge for a reason. He came to help us heal." Sarah's gaze softened as she looked at her daughter. She could see the determination in Ivy Lee's eyes, the unwavering belief in Snowball's purpose. Ivy Lee, she said gently, her voice filled with emotion. I understand how much Snowball means to you. He means the world to me too. He's been my rock, my constant companion, especially after the accident. Her voice trailed off, her eyes filling with tears. Ivy Lee reached out and took her mother's hand, her touch gentle and comforting. I know, Mum, she wrote. I know how much you love him, but Oak Ridge needs him. I need him, and I think he needs to be there too. Sarah looked at Snowball, who was now rubbing against Ivy Lee's legs, his purrs rumbling softly. She could sense his own connection to Ivy Lee, the unspoken understanding that passed between them. A long silence filled the room, broken only by the ticking of a grandfather clock in the corner. Sarah's face was etched with a mixture of sadness and contemplation. She was torn between her own love for Snowball and her desire to honor her daughter's wishes. Finally, she took a deep breath and looked at Ivy Lee, her eyes filled with a quiet resolve. Okay, she said softly. Okay, Ivy Lee. Snowball can stay in Oak Ridge. Ivy Lee's face lit up with joy. She threw her arms around her mother, hugging her tightly. Thank you, Mum, she whispered, her voice filled with gratitude. Thank you. Margaret and Emery exchanged relieved glances, their hearts filled with happiness for their granddaughter. They knew how much this meant to Ivy Lee, how much Snowball had helped her find her way back to herself. Sarah knelt down and scooped Snowball into her arms. She held him close, her fingers stroking his soft fur. Oh, Snowball, she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. My sweet Snowball, I'm going to miss you so much. Snowball nuzzled against her cheek, his purrs growing louder. It was as if he understood the sacrifice Sarah was making, the love that lay behind her decision. But I know you'll be happy in Oak Ridge, Sarah continued, her voice stronger now. You'll be with Ivy Lee, and you'll be where you belong. She handed Snowball to Ivy Lee, her eyes filled with a mixture of sadness and hope. Take good care of him, sweetheart, she said softly. He's very special. Ivy Lee nodded, her arms wrapped tightly around Snowball. She felt a surge of love and gratitude, a profound sense of connection to her mother and her beloved cat. As they prepared to leave, Sarah walked them to the door. She hugged Ivy Lee tightly, her tears flowing freely now. I love you, Ivy Lee, she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. I love you more than words can say. Ivy Lee hugged her back, her own eyes filling with tears. I love you too, Mum, she wrote in her notebook, her handwriting shaky. I'll visit you soon. Margaret and Emery embraced Sarah, offering words of comfort and support. They promised to stay in touch, to keep her updated on Ivy Lee and Snowball. As they drove away, Ivy Lee looked out the window, her gaze fixed on Sarah's house until it disappeared from sight. Snowball was nestled safely in her lap, his purrs, a soothing presence beside her. The journey back to Oak Ridge was filled with a quiet contentment. Ivy Lee knew that she had made the right decision, that Snowball belonged in Oak Ridge, where he could continue to bring comfort and healing to those in need. But she also knew that her journey was far from over. She still had questions about Snowball's past, about the legend of the white cat, and about the mysteries that lay hidden within the heart of Oak Ridge. And she was determined to uncover the truth, no matter how long it took or what obstacles she might face. Snowball's return to Oak Ridge was met with a mixture of joy and relief. The townspeople, who had grown fond of the white cat, welcomed him back with open arms and gentle smiles. He resumed his familiar spot under the gazebo, his presence a comforting constant in the changing rhythm of the town. Ivy Lee's visits to the town square became a daily celebration. She would spend hours with Snowball, reading to him from her favorite books, sharing stories of her day, and simply enjoying his quiet companionship. Snowball, in turn, seemed to thrive in her presence. His fur grew softer and cleaner, his amber eyes sparkled with contentment, and his purrs resonated with a deep sense of belonging. Margaret and Emery watched with grateful hearts as their granddaughter blossomed. Snowball had brought a light back into Ivy Lee's world, a light that had been dimmed by grief and silence. They were thankful for the bond that had formed between them, a bond that transcended words and spoke volumes of love and healing. However, the mystery surrounding Snowball's past continued to intrigue Ivy Lee. She was determined to uncover the truth about his origins and his connection to the legend of the White Cat. With Snowball by her side, she embarked on a quest to explore the hidden corners of Oak Ridge, searching for clues that might unlock the secrets of his past. Her journey led her to the old Oak Ridge Cemetery, a peaceful and serene place where generations of townspeople lay resting. The cemetery was located on a hill overlooking the town, its weathered tombstones standing as silent witnesses to the passage of time. Ivy Lee wandered among the graves, her footsteps soft on the fallen leaves. Snowball followed close behind, his tail twitching with curiosity. She paused at each tombstone, reading the inscriptions, imagining the lives of those who had come before. One particular tombstone caught her eye. It was old and worn, its inscription barely legible. Ivy Lee knelt down and carefully brushed away the dirt and leaves, revealing the name engraved on the stone. Elias Thorne, beloved husband and father. As she continued to clean the tombstone, she noticed a small faded photograph tucked into a crevice. She carefully pulled it out, her heart pounding with anticipation. The photograph was of a young man with kind eyes and a gentle smile. He was holding a small white kitten, identical to Snowball, in his arms. Ivy Lee gasped, her hands trembling. Could this be a clue to Snowball's past? She showed the photograph to Snowball, her eyes searching his for any sign of recognition. Snowball sniffed the photograph, his ears twitching, but his expression remained unchanged. Undeterred, Ivy Lee decided to learn more about Elias Thorne. She visited the Oak Ridge Historical Society again, hoping that Mrs. Thompson might have some information. Mrs. Thompson's eyes widened when she saw the photograph. Elias Thorne, she said softly, her voice filled with a mixture of sadness and fondness. He was a kind and gentle soul. He loved animals, especially cats. Mrs. Thompson explained that Elias Thorne had been a young man who had lived in Oak Ridge in the early 1900s. He had been a carpenter by trade, known for his skill and craftsmanship. He had also been a devoted husband and father, deeply loved by his family and the community. Elias found a white kitten abandoned in the woods, Mrs. Thompson recounted, her voice filled with emotion. He took him in and named him Casper. They were inseparable. Ivy Lee's heart skipped a beat. Casper. Could it be possible that Snowball was a descendant of Casper? Was there a connection between the white cat of the past and the white cat of the present? Mrs. Thompson shared stories of Casper's life with Elias Thorne, his playful antics, his unwavering loyalty, and his uncanny ability to sense when someone was in need of comfort. She told of how Casper had stayed by Elias's side during a serious illness, offering silent companionship and unwavering love. Casper was more than just a pet, Mrs. Thompson said softly. He was a member of the Thorne family. He brought them joy, comfort, and a sense of peace. As Ivy Lee listened to Mrs. Thompson's stories, a sense of wonder washed over her. The parallels between Casper and Snowball were undeniable. The white fur, the amber eyes, the gentle demeanor, the ability to connect with those in sorrow. It was as if history was repeating itself. Ivy Lee left the Historical Society with a renewed sense of purpose. She knew that she had to continue her quest, to uncover the full extent of Snowball's connection to Oak Ridge and the legend of the White Cat. With Snowball by her side, she ventured deeper into the town's past, seeking out old records, interviewing elderly residents, and exploring forgotten corners. She discovered tales of other white cats who had appeared in Oak Ridge throughout the years, each one bringing comfort and healing to those in need. There was a story of a white cat who had stayed with a grieving widow, offering her solace after the loss of her husband. There was a tale of a white cat who had helped a young boy overcome his fear of the dark, and there was a legend of a white cat who had guided a lost traveler back to safety during a fierce blizzard. With each new story, Ivy Lee's belief in the legend of the white cat grew stronger. She realized that Snowball was not just an ordinary cat. He was a part of something bigger, something ancient and mystical. As the days turned into weeks and the autumn leaves continued to fall, Ivy Lee's quest for answers intensified. She felt a growing sense of urgency, a feeling that she was on the verge of uncovering a profound truth, a truth that could change her life and the fate of Oak Ridge forever. Ivy Lee's quest for answers led her to a dusty, forgotten corner of Oak Ridge, a place she had never ventured before. It was a narrow alleyway, hidden between the town's oldest buildings, where the sun rarely reached. At the end of the alley stood a small, unassuming bookshop, its windows filled with stacks of old, leather-bound volumes. The sign above the door read, "The Old Bookshop," its letters faded and worn, as if the shop itself had been lost in time. Ivy Lee hesitated for a moment, feeling a sense of both curiosity and trepidation. There was an air of mystery about the place, a feeling that it held secrets waiting to be uncovered. With Snowball padding silently beside her, Ivy Lee pushed open the heavy wooden door and stepped inside. The air was thick with the scent of old paper and leather, a comforting and familiar aroma. The shop was dimly lit, the only light coming from a small window at the back and a flickering lamp on the counter. Shelves lined the walls from floor to ceiling, overflowing with books of all shapes and sizes. There were towering volumes with gilded spines, delicate paperbacks with faded covers, and everything in between. It was a bibliophile's paradise, a place where time seemed to stand still. Behind the counter stood an elderly woman with silver hair pulled back in a tight bun and wire-rimmed glasses perched on her nose. She was engrossed in reading a book, her lips moving silently as she followed the words on the page. Ivy Lee cleared her throat softly, her voice barely a whisper. The woman looked up, her eyes widening in surprise. "Well, hello there," she said, her voice surprisingly strong for her age. "I don't get many visitors these days. What can I do for you, dear?" Ivy Lee approached the counter, her notebook clutched tightly in her hands. Snowball sat patiently at her feet, his amber eyes observing the woman with quiet curiosity. "I'm looking for information about the legend of the white cat," Ivy Lee wrote in her notebook, her handwriting neat and precise. "I've heard stories about white cats who have appeared in Oak Ridge throughout history, bringing comfort to those in need." The woman's eyes lit up with recognition. "Ah, the legend," she said, her voice filled with a hint of nostalgia. "It's an old tale, passed down through generations. Not many people remember it anymore." "I do," Ivy Lee wrote, "and I think Snowball might be connected to it." The woman chuckled softly. "Snowball, you say? He's a handsome fellow, that's for sure. But connected to the legend? That's quite a claim." "I've found old photographs," Ivy Lee wrote, showing the woman the picture of Elias Thorne and Casper. "And I've heard stories about other white cats who have appeared in Oak Ridge." The woman examined the photograph, her brow furrowed in thought. "Elias Thorne," she murmured. "Yes, I remember hearing about him. He was a good man. And Casper, he was a special cat." She paused, her gaze drifting towards the shelves behind her. "You know," she said slowly, "I might have something that could help you with your search. Something that has been hidden away for many years." The woman disappeared into a back room, her footsteps echoing through the silent shop. Ivy Lee waited patiently, her heart pounding with anticipation. Snowball remained by her side, his presence a comforting reassurance. After what seemed like an eternity, the woman returned, carrying a large, leather-bound book. Its cover was blank, its pages yellowed and brittle with age. "This book," the woman said, her voice hushed with reverence, "is a collection of Oak Ridge legends and folklore. It was compiled by my grandfather, who was the town historian. It contains stories that have been passed down orally for centuries, tales of magic, mystery, And the unexplained, Ivy Lee's eyes widened. Do you think there's anything about the white cats in it? She wrote, her handwriting trembling slightly. The woman smiled. I believe there is, she said. But be warned, child. This book holds powerful secrets. Once you open it, there's no turning back. Ivy Lee nodded, her determination unwavering. She reached out and carefully took the book, her fingers tracing the smooth leather cover. It felt warm to the touch, as if it possessed a life of its own. With trembling hands, she opened the book to the first page. The words were written in elegant calligraphy, their ink faded but still legible. The Legend of the White Cats, the first chapter read. Ivy Lee's breath caught in her throat as she began to read. The book told of an ancient prophecy, a tale of a lineage of white cats who were destined to appear in Oak Ridge during times of great need. These cats, according to the legend, possessed a unique connection to the town's spirit, an ability to sense its pain and offer healing. They were said to be guardians of Oak Ridge, protectors of its people, and keepers of its secrets. They were the silent witnesses to the town's history, their presence a constant reminder of the enduring power of love and compassion. As Ivy Lee read on, she discovered that the white cats were not merely animals, they were mystical beings, imbued with a touch of magic. They were said to possess heightened senses, an ability to communicate telepathically, and the power to heal emotional wounds. The book also revealed that the white cats were bound to Oak Ridge by an ancient enchantment, a spell woven by the town's founders to ensure their protection. This enchantment linked the cats to the land itself, drawing their strength from its energy and binding their fate to its destiny. Ivy Lee's mind raced as she absorbed the information. The legend of the white cats was far more complex and profound than she had ever imagined. And Snowball, he was not just a descendant of Casper, he was a part of this ancient lineage, a guardian of Oak Ridge, a keeper of its secrets. The woman watched Ivy Lee's face, her expression a mixture of curiosity and concern. Are you all right, dear? She asked gently. You look as if you've seen a ghost. Ivy Lee nodded slowly, her eyes wide with wonder. I've learned so much, she wrote. Snowball. He's not just a cat. He's a part of a legend, a prophecy. The woman smiled knowingly. I told you this book held secrets, she said softly, but the greatest secret is yet to be revealed. She pointed to a passage in the book, her finger tracing the words. The prophecy states, she read aloud, that when the greatest darkness threatens Oak Ridge, a white cat will rise, guided by a child of silence to restore balance and bring forth a new era of peace. Ivy Lee's heart pounded in her chest. A child of silence. Was the prophecy referring to her? Was she destined to play a role in Oak Ridge's fate? The woman nodded, her eyes filled with a knowing light. The book says that the child of silence will possess a unique gift, an ability to communicate with the white cat on a deeper level, to understand its thoughts and feelings. Ivy Lee looked at Snowball, who was now gazing up at her with his amber eyes. She felt a strange connection to him, a sense of understanding that transcended words. But what is the greatest darkness? She wrote, her handwriting filled with urgency. What threat is Oak Ridge facing? The woman's smile faded, her expression becoming serious. That, my dear, she said, her voice low, is the mystery you must unravel. The answer lies hidden within the heart of Oak Ridge, waiting to be discovered. She closed the book gently, her hand resting on its cover. Be careful, Ivy Lee, she said, her voice filled with warning. The path ahead will be dangerous, and the truth may be more than you can bear. Ivy Lee nodded, her determination unwavering. She knew that she had to continue her quest to uncover the secrets of Oak Ridge and fulfill her destiny. With Snowball by her side, she stepped out of the old bookshop, the ancient book clutched tightly in her hands. The alleyway seemed darker now, the shadows deeper, as if the secrets she had learned had cast a spell over the town. As she walked back towards the town square, Ivy Lee felt a sense of both excitement and trepidation. She knew that the journey ahead would be fraught with peril, but she was prepared to face whatever challenges lay in her path. For she had discovered that the power of love, the wisdom of the past, and the magic of a white cat could overcome any darkness, no matter how great. As Ivy Lee delved deeper into the mysteries of Oak Ridge, she began to notice subtle changes in the town's atmosphere. A sense of unease seemed to permeate the air, a shadow lurking beneath the surface of its idyllic charm. The townsfolk, once known for their cheerful demeanor and close-knit community spirit, grew more withdrawn and suspicious. Conversations were whispered, doors were locked, and a sense of fear hung heavy in the air. Even the familiar landmarks of Oak Ridge seemed to reflect this growing darkness. Mrs. Patterson's wind chimes, once a source of comfort, now sounded like mournful cries. In the wind, the vibrant autumn leaves, once a symbol of beauty and change, now appeared withered and lifeless. Ivy Lee couldn't shake the feeling that something was deeply wrong, that a malevolent force was slowly creeping into Oak Ridge, threatening to destroy its peace and harmony. Her suspicions were confirmed one evening when she overheard a hushed conversation between her grandparents. Margaret and Emery were discussing strange occurrences that had been plaguing the town. "The livestock have been acting restless," Margaret said, her voice filled with worry. "The animals seem agitated, almost frightened, and some of them have gone missing without a trace. There have been reports of vandalism too," Emery added, his brow furrowed with concern. "Someone has been defacing property, leaving strange symbols and markings. No one knows who's responsible." Ivy Lee's heart pounded in her chest. The vandalism, the missing livestock, the growing fear among the townspeople, it all seemed connected to the prophecy in the old book. The greatest darkness was descending upon Oak Ridge, and she was destined to play a role in its unfolding. Determined to uncover the truth, Ivy Lee decided to investigate the vandalism herself. With Snowball by her side, she ventured out into the town after dark, her notebook and a small flashlight, her only companions. The streets of Oak Ridge were eerily silent, the houses dark and still. A sense of foreboding hung heavy in the air, as if the town itself were holding its breath. Ivy Lee carefully examined the vandalized properties, her flashlight beam revealing the strange symbols etched into walls and windows. The symbols were unlike anything she had ever seen before, intricate patterns of lines and circles that seemed to pulse with a dark energy. As she studied the symbols, a shiver ran down her spine. They felt ancient and powerful, as if they were connected to something beyond the realm of human understanding. Snowball, too, seemed disturbed by the symbols. His fur bristled, his ears twitched, and he let out low growls, his gaze fixed on the markings with a mixture of fear and anger. Ivy Lee followed the trail of vandalism, her investigation leading her to the outskirts of Oak Ridge, to the edge of the Whispering Woods. The woods were a dense and ancient forest, shrouded in mist and mystery. Locals whispered tales of strange occurrences within its depths, of eerie sounds and unexplained disappearances. Ivy Lee hesitated at the edge of the woods, a sense of unease washing over her. The air felt colder here, the shadows deeper, as if the forest itself were alive and watching her every move. Despite her apprehension, Ivy Lee knew that she had to venture into the woods. The answers she sought lay hidden within its depths, and she was determined to uncover the truth, no matter how dangerous the journey might be. With Snowball leading the way, Ivy Lee stepped into the Whispering Woods. The trees towered above her, their branches intertwining to form a dark and impenetrable canopy. The only light came from the moon, its pale glow barely penetrating the dense foliage. The silence of the woods was broken only by the rustling of leaves and the snapping of twigs underfoot. Ivy Lee felt as if she were being watched, her every move scrutinized by unseen eyes. As they ventured deeper into the woods, the atmosphere grew increasingly oppressive. The air became thick with a strange energy, a malevolent presence that seemed to seep from the very ground. Snowball's behavior, grew more erratic. He paced restlessly, hissing at shadows, and his amber eyes glowed with an eerie intensity. Ivy Lee could feel his fear, his anxiety, and it heightened her own sense of unease. Suddenly, Snowball stopped abruptly, his body tense, his gaze fixed on a dark shape ahead. Ivy Lee followed his gaze, her heart pounding in her chest. In the distance, she could see a clearing, bathed in an unnatural light. In the center of the clearing stood a figure, cloaked in shadows, its face obscured by a hood. The figure was performing a strange ritual, chanting in an unknown language, its voice echoing through the silent woods. The symbols Ivy Lee had seen earlier were etched into the ground around the figure, glowing with an eerie light. Ivy Lee's breath caught in her throat. She knew, with a chilling certainty, that this figure was the source of the darkness that had descended upon Oak Ridge. This was the enemy she had been destined to face, the threat she had been warned about in the old book. Snowball let out a fierce hiss, his fur standing on end. He lunged towards the figure, his movements swift and agile. The figure turned, its face still hidden in shadow, and raised its hand. A dark energy erupted from the figure's hand, striking Snowball with a force that sent him flying backwards. Ivy Lee cried out in horror as Snowball landed heavily on the ground, his body limp and motionless. Tears streamed down Ivy Lee's face as she rushed to Snowball's side. She cradled him in her arms, her hands trembling as she checked for a pulse. Snowball's heart was beating weakly, his breathing shallow and laboured. He was alive, but barely. Ivy Lee knew that she had to get him out of the woods, away from the figure and its dark magic. With a strength she didn't know she possessed, Ivy Lee lifted Snowball into her arms and turned to flee, but the figure stood blocking her path, its dark energy swirling around it like a malevolent aura. The figure raised its hand again, its voice echoing through the woods, its words filled with power and malice. Ivy Lee braced herself for another attack, her heart filled with fear and despair. But then, something unexpected happened. The ground beneath her feet began to tremble, the trees around her swayed violently, and the air crackled with energy. A surge of light erupted from the forest floor, a blinding white light that pushed back the darkness and illuminated the clearing. The figure cried out in pain and surprise, its dark energy dissipating in the face of the overwhelming light. Ivy Lee shielded her eyes, her heart pounding with a mixture of fear and wonder. When the light subsided, the figure was gone, vanished, into thin air. The woods were silent once more. The oppressive atmosphere lifted, replaced by a sense of calm and peace. Ivy Lee looked down at Snowball, who was still unconscious in her arms. She knew that she had to get him back to Oak Ridge, to safety, where she could tend to his wounds and unravel the mystery of the figure in the woods. The battle had just begun, and the fate of Oak Ridge hung in the balance. Ivy Lee stumbled out of the whispering woods, her arms cradling the injured Snowball. Her heart pounded with fear and desperation as she rushed back towards Oak Ridge, praying that she could reach safety before it was too late. The town square, once a place of comfort and familiarity, now felt alien and threatening. The shadows seemed to deepen, the silence more oppressive. Ivy Lee hurried towards her grandparents' house, her footsteps echoing through the deserted streets. Margaret and Emery were waiting anxiously on the porch, their faces etched with worry. They gasped when they saw Ivy Lee carrying the limp and injured Snowball. "What happened?" Margaret cried, her voice trembling. "What's wrong with Snowball?" Ivy Lee couldn't speak, her throat tight with emotion. She rushed inside, her grandparents following close behind. They laid Snowball gently on a soft blanket in the living room, their eyes filled with concern as they examined his wounds. Snowball's breathing was shallow and laboured, his body cold and still. A dark mark was visible on his chest, a lingering reminder of the figure's attack. "We need to call a vet," Emery said urgently, reaching for the phone. "There's one in the next town, Dr. Evans. He's the best." But Ivy Lee shook her head, her eyes filled with determination. She knew that there was no time to wait. Snowball needed help now, and she believed that she knew how to save him. She retrieved the old book from her backpack, her hands trembling as she flipped through its fragile pages. She searched for the chapter on the white cats, her eyes scanning the text for any mention of healing or protection. Finally, she found it. A passage described the white cat's unique ability to heal, not just physical wounds, but also emotional and spiritual ones. The book stated that the cats possessed a connection to the earth's energy, a power that could be harnessed to restore balance and harmony. Ivy Lee read on, her heart filled with hope. The book described a ritual, an ancient ceremony performed by the town's founders to protect the white cats and enhance their healing abilities. The ritual involved chanting, the use of specific herbs, and the drawing of symbols on the ground. Ivy Lee knew that she had to try. She had to do everything in her power to save Snowball, even if it meant performing a ritual she barely understood. With her grandparents watching in stunned silence, Ivy Lee gathered the necessary items. She found candles in the kitchen, herbs in the garden, and a bowl of water in the bathroom. She cleared a space in the center of the living room and began to draw the symbols from the book on the floor, her movements precise and focused. As she worked, she chanted the words from the book, her voice soft but firm. The ancient language felt strange on her tongue, but she spoke with conviction, her belief in the ritual growing stronger with each word. Margaret and Emery watched in awe as the room filled with a soft, warm light. The air crackled with energy, and a sense of peace settled over the house. Ivy Lee placed her hands on Snowball's chest, her touch gentle and loving. She closed her eyes and focused her energy, channeling her love and hope into the white cat's body. The room grew warmer, the light brighter. The symbols on the floor glowed with an ethereal radiance, and then something miraculous happened. Snowball's body began to glow, the dark mark on his chest fading away. His breathing became steadier, his heart stronger. He stirred, his amber eyes fluttering open. A collective gasp filled the room as Snowball lifted his head and looked around, his gaze settling on Ivy Lee. He let out a weak meow, his voice filled with gratitude and affection. Tears streamed down Ivy Lee's face as she gathered Snowball into her arms, hugging him tightly. He was alive. He was safe. And it was all thanks to the ancient magic of the white cats. Margaret and Emery watched, their eyes filled with wonder and disbelief. They had witnessed a miracle, a testament to the power of love and the enduring magic of Oak Ridge. As the night wore on, Snowball's strength returned. He purred contentedly in Ivy Lee's lap, his fur soft and warm. The dark energy that had threatened to consume him was gone, replaced by a radiant light. Ivy Lee knew that the battle was far from over. The figure in the woods was still out there, and the darkness that had descended upon Oak Ridge was still a threat. But she also knew that she was not alone. She had Snowball, her grandparents, and the ancient magic of the white cats on her side. And she had the courage to face whatever challenges lay ahead, to protect Oak Ridge and fulfill her destiny as the child of silence. The next morning, Ivy Lee awoke with a renewed sense of purpose. Snowball was resting peacefully at the foot of her bed, his recovery a testament to the power of the ancient magic. She knew that she had to act quickly, to warn the townspeople about the impending danger and prepare them for the coming battle. She decided to seek the guidance of the Council of Elders, a group of respected individuals who had lived in Oak Ridge for generations. They were the keepers of the town's traditions, the guardians of its history, and the wisest members of the community. Ivy Lee had met some of the elders before, during her visits to the Historical Society. She knew that they were open-minded and compassionate, willing to listen to her even though she was just a child. With Snowball by her side, Ivy Lee made her way to the Oak Ridge Town Hall, a grand old building with a towering clock tower that had stood for over a century. The Council of Elders held their meetings in the main hall, a spacious room with high ceilings and stained glass windows. As she entered the hall, Ivy Lee saw the elders seated around a large oak table, their faces etched with concern. They had heard about the strange occurrences in town, the vandalism, the missing livestock, and the growing sense of unease. Ivy Lee, Mr. Harrison, the head of the council, said gently, "We were wondering when you would come. We know you've been investigating these strange events." Ivy Lee nodded, her heart filled with a mixture of fear and determination. She knew that she had to be brave, to speak the truth, even if it sounded unbelievable. She showed the elders the old book, explaining the legend of the white cats and the prophecy of the child of silence. She told them about her encounter in the whispering woods, the figure in the shadows, and the dark energy that threatened to consume Oak Ridge. The elders listened intently, their expressions ranging from skepticism to curiosity. Some of them shook their heads in disbelief, while others exchanged knowing glances, as if they had heard whispers of these legends before. "This is a lot to take in, Ivy Lee," Mrs. Gable, the town librarian and a respected elder, said thoughtfully. "We've always known there were strange things happening in Oak Ridge, unexplained phenomena, but we never thought it could be something evil. The book speaks of a great darkness," Ivy Lee wrote in her notebook, her handwriting firm. "A threat that could destroy Oak Ridge. We have to be prepared." Mr. Harrison nodded slowly. "We've always believed in the power of this town, its resilience and its spirit. But we've also learned to respect the old ways, the legends and the folklore. There might be some truth to what you say." The elders discussed the situation amongst themselves, their voices hushed but urgent. They debated the validity of the prophecy, the nature of the threat, and the best course of action. Finally, they reached a decision. They would take Ivy Lee's warnings seriously. They would alert the townspeople, organize a defense, and prepare for the coming battle. "We need to gather the community," Mr. Harrison said, his voice filled with resolve. "We need to inform them of the danger and ask for their help. This is not just a battle for Oak Ridge, it's a battle for our very souls." The elders agreed to call a town meeting that evening. They would spread the word through the town crier, the church bells, and word of mouth. Everyone in Oak Ridge needed to be aware of the impending threat. As Ivy Lee left the town hall, she felt a sense of both relief and apprehension. The elders had believed her, they were taking action, but the danger was still very real, and she knew that the coming battle would be fierce. With Snowball by her side, she returned home to her grandparents, her mind racing with thoughts of the challenges ahead. She knew that she had to be strong, to be brave, to fulfill her destiny as the child of silence. And she knew that with the help of the white cat, the wisdom of the elders, and the spirit of Oak Ridge, she could overcome any darkness, no matter how great. As dusk settled over Oak Ridge, the townspeople gathered in the town square, their faces a mixture of curiosity, fear, and apprehension. The news of the impending danger had spread quickly, carried on the wind like a chilling whisper. The elders stood on the steps of the town hall, their presence commanding respect and attention. Mr. Harrison stepped forward, his voice strong and resonant, addressing the crowd. "My fellow citizens of Oak Ridge," he began, his gaze sweeping across the faces before him. "We have called this meeting to discuss the strange events that have been plaguing our town. The vandalism, the missing livestock, the unease that has settled over our community. These are not isolated incidents. They are signs of a growing darkness, a threat that could destroy everything we hold dear." A murmur rippled through the crowd, a wave of fear and uncertainty. The townspeople looked at each other, their eyes searching for answers, for reassurance. Mr. Harrison continued, his voice filled with urgency. "We have consulted the ancient records of Oak Ridge, the legends and folklore passed down through generations, and what we have discovered is chilling. We are facing a threat that has threatened this town before, a malevolent force that seeks to disrupt the balance of our world." He paused, letting his words sink in. But we are not without hope. The legends also speak of a prophecy, a tale of a white cat and a child of silence who will rise to defend Oakridge and restore peace. All eyes turned to Ivy Lee, who stood at the front of the crowd, Snowball by her side. She felt a surge of both fear and determination, the weight of her destiny pressing down on her shoulders. Some of the townspeople gasped, their faces filled with disbelief. Others nodded slowly, as if they had always suspected that there was more to the legends than just old wives' tales. Ivy Lee has shown us the truth, Mrs. Gable said, her voice filled with conviction. She has witnessed the darkness firsthand. She has seen the figure in the whispering woods, the source of the evil that threatens us. A collective shudder ran through the crowd. The whispering woods had always been a place of mystery and fear, and the thought of a malevolent presence lurking within its depths sent chills down their spines. But we are not defenseless, Mr. Harrison said, his voice rising with strength. We have the ancient magic of Oakridge on our side. The white cats, the guardians of this town, possess a power that can overcome any darkness. And we have Ivy Lee, the child of silence, who has proven her courage and her connection to the white cats. He raised his hand, his gaze sweeping across the crowd. We must stand together, my friends. We must unite as one community, and we must fight for our town, for our homes, for our future. A cheer erupted from the crowd, a surge of defiance and resolve. The fear that had gripped them moments before was replaced by a sense of unity and purpose. They would not cower in the face of darkness. They would stand together and fight. The elders outlined their plan of action. They would form a defense force comprised of the town's strongest and bravest citizens. They would gather supplies, weapons, and tools, and they would prepare for a battle unlike any Oakridge had ever seen. The townspeople responded with enthusiasm and determination. Farmers offered their livestock as provisions. Carpenters crafted weapons and shields. Weavers created protective garments. Everyone contributed their skills and resources to the common cause. As the night wore on, the town square transformed into a bustling hub of activity. The air was filled with the sounds of hammering, sawing, and chanting. The atmosphere was charged with a mixture of fear and excitement, a sense that something extraordinary was about to happen. Ivy Lee watched in awe as the townspeople worked together, their unity and resilience a testament to the strength of their community. She knew that with their combined efforts they could overcome any obstacle, defeat any darkness. But she also knew that the battle ahead would be dangerous, and that the fate of Oakridge rested on her shoulders. She had to be prepared to face the figure in the woods, to confront the source of the evil, and to fulfill her destiny as the child of silence. With Snowball by her side, she stood at the edge of the crowd, her gaze fixed on the whispering woods. The forest loomed in the distance, dark and menacing, a reminder of the threat that awaited them. But Ivy Lee was not afraid. She had the courage of her convictions, the support of her community, and the magic of the white cat to guide her. And she knew that with their combined strength, they could bring light to the darkness and restore peace to Oakridge. The days that followed the town meeting were filled with a flurry of activity. The people of Oakridge worked tirelessly, transforming their peaceful town into a fortified stronghold. The defense force, led by the town's strongest and bravest men and women, practiced their formations and strategies. They learned to wield their makeshift weapons, to work as a team, and to protect each other. The carpenters built barricades and fortifications, reinforcing the town's entrances and strategic points. They crafted shields and armor, using wood, metal, and any other materials they could find. The weavers created banners and flags, emblazoned with symbols of hope and defiance. They sewed protective garments, imbued with ancient runes and charms. The farmers provided food and supplies, ensuring that the townspeople had the sustenance they needed to sustain their efforts. They tended to the livestock, protecting them from the darkness that lurked outside the town's borders. Even the children contributed, gathering stones and pebbles for slingshots, crafting small amulets and charms, and offering their support and encouragement. Ivy Lee played a crucial role in the preparations. Her knowledge of the old book and the white cats proving invaluable. She advised the elders on the ancient magic, the symbols and rituals that could protect them from the darkness. She worked closely with the defense force, teaching them how to harness the power of the Earth's energy, to channel their inner strength, and to fight with courage and determination. And she spent countless hours with Snowball, strengthening their bond, preparing him for the role he was destined to play in the coming battle. She learned to understand his thoughts and feelings, to communicate with him on a deeper level. As the days passed, the atmosphere in Oak Ridge grew increasingly tense. The sense of unease that had settled over the town deepened, and the shadows seemed to lengthen with each passing hour. But despite the fear and apprehension, the people of Oak Ridge remained resolute. They were united in their determination to protect their town, to defend their homes, and to defeat the darkness that threatened to consume them. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the town square, Ivy Lee stood with Snowball on the steps of the town hall, observing the preparations. The town square, once a symbol of peace and community, now resembled a battlefield. Barricades stood tall, weapons gleamed in the fading light, and the air thrummed with a sense of anticipation. Ivy Lee felt a surge of pride and awe as she looked at the people of Oak Ridge. They had transformed themselves from ordinary citizens into warriors, their courage and unity a testament to the enduring spirit of their town. But she also felt a pang of fear, a sense of foreboding that grew stronger with each passing moment. She knew that the battle ahead would be fierce and that the outcome was uncertain. Snowball nudged her hand with his head, his amber eyes filled with a mixture of concern and reassurance. Ivy Lee smiled, stroking his soft fur, drawing strength from his presence. "We're ready," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "We're ready for whatever comes." As darkness fell, a hush settled over Oak Ridge. The preparations were complete, the defenses in place, and the townspeople stood ready, their hearts filled with a mixture of fear and hope. The only sound was the rustling of leaves in the wind, a chilling whisper that seemed to carry a warning from the whispering woods. The darkness was coming, and the battle for Oak Ridge was about to begin. The darkness descended upon Oak Ridge like a shroud, enveloping the town in an eerie silence. The stars, once bright and comforting, were obscured by a thick fog that rolled in from the whispering woods. A chill wind swept through the streets, carrying with it a sense of dread and foreboding. The townspeople stood ready, their faces pale, but resolute, their weapons gripped tightly in their hands. Ivy Lee stood at the forefront of the defense, Snowball by her side. She could feel the ancient magic of Oak Ridge coursing through her veins, empowering her with courage and strength. Suddenly, a blood-curdling howl echoed from the whispering woods, shattering the silence. The trees swayed violently, their branches reaching out like gnarled fingers. And then, they came. Dark figures emerged from the woods, their forms indistinct in the fog, their eyes glowing with an unholy light. They moved with unnatural speed and agility, their movements fluid and menacing. The townspeople braced themselves, their hearts pounding in their chests. The battle had begun. The first wave of attackers crashed against the town's defenses, their dark energy clashing against the ancient magic that protected Oak Ridge. The air crackled with power, and the ground trembled beneath their feet. The defense force fought bravely, their makeshift weapons striking against the shadowy figures. They fought with the ferocity of lions, protecting their homes, their families, their town. Ivy Lee and Snowball fought at the forefront, their bond a source of strength and resilience. Ivy Lee wielded a staff, its tip glowing with a white light, pushing back the darkness with each strike. Snowball moved like a blur, his white fur a beacon in the gloom, his claws and teeth tearing through the shadowy figures. He fought with a fierce determination, protecting Ivy Lee and the townspeople with unwavering loyalty. The battle raged on, the darkness relentless, the townspeople unwavering. The air was filled with the sounds of clashing weapons, roaring spells, and cries of pain and defiance. But as the battle intensified, the darkness grew stronger. The shadowy figures multiplied, their attacks more ferocious, their energy more potent. The townspeople began to tire, their defenses weakening. Ivy Lee felt a surge of despair. The darkness seemed unstoppable, the prophecy doomed to fail. But then she remembered the words of the old book, the legend of the white cats, the power that lay within Oak Ridge. She raised her staff, its light shining brighter, and she called out to the townspeople, her voice filled with conviction. Remember who we are. Remember what we're fighting for. We are the people of Oak Ridge, and we will not be defeated. Her words ignited a spark of hope in the hearts of the townspeople. They rallied, their energy renewed, their determination strengthened. They fought with renewed vigor, pushing back the darkness, protecting their town. Ivy Lee and Snowball fought with a ferocity that matched the darkness. They moved as one, their bond unbreakable, their power unstoppable. They were the white cat and the child of silence, the heroes of the prophecy, and they would not allow the darkness to prevail. As the battle reached its climax, the figure from the Whispering Woods emerged from the shadows. Its dark energy pulsed with power, its presence radiating malice. Ivy Lee knew that this was the source of the evil, the ultimate enemy. She had to defeat it, or all would be lost. With Snowball by her side, Ivy Lee faced the figure, her heart filled with courage and determination. The fate of Oak Ridge hung in the balance, and she was ready to fight for its survival. The figure from the Whispering Woods stood before Ivy Lee, its dark energy swirling around it like a vortex of malice. Its face remained hidden in shadow, its intentions shrouded in mystery. Ivy Lee felt a surge of fear, but she pushed it down, focusing on the task at hand. She had to protect Oak Ridge, to defeat this evil, and to fulfill her destiny. Snowball stood beside her, his white fur glowing with a soft light, his amber eyes fixed on the figure with unwavering determination. He was ready to fight, to defend Ivy Lee, and to protect the town he had come to call home. The figure raised its hand, its voice echoing through the square, its words filled with power and menace. Ivy Lee felt a wave of dark energy wash over her, attempting to weaken her resolve. But she stood firm, her own energy rising to meet the darkness. She was the child of silence, the chosen one, and she would not be swayed. With a cry of defiance, Ivy Lee charged towards the figure, her staff leading the way. Snowball followed close behind, his movements swift and agile. The battle was fierce and intense. Ivy Lee and Snowball fought with a courage and determination that matched the figure's dark power. They moved as one, their bond unbreakable, their strength unstoppable. Ivy Lee's staff glowed with a blinding white light, pushing back the darkness, weakening the figure's hold on the town. Snowball's claws and teeth tore through the shadowy energy, disrupting its flow, breaking its power. The figure fought back, with equal ferocity, its dark energy lashing out, attempting to overwhelm Ivy Lee and Snowball. It summoned shadowy creatures from the Whispering Woods, their eyes glowing with malice, their forms indistinct in the fog. The townspeople joined the battle, their makeshift weapons striking against the shadowy creatures, their courage fueled by their determination to protect their town. The square was a whirlwind of light and shadow, of courage and fear, of hope and despair. The fate of Oak Ridge hung in the balance, and the outcome of the battle rested on Ivy Lee's shoulders. As the battle reached its climax, Ivy Lee knew that she had to unleash the full power of the ancient magic, the force that lay dormant within Oak Ridge, waiting to be awakened. She raised her staff high above her head, her voice ringing out through the square, her words ancient and powerful. The ground beneath her feet began to tremble. The air around her crackled with energy. A surge of light erupted from the earth, a blinding white light that pushed back the darkness, illuminating the square with an ethereal glow. The figure cried, out in pain and surprise, its dark energy dissipating in the face of the overwhelming light. The shadowy creatures dissolved into nothingness, their power broken, their threat neutralized. The darkness that had enveloped Oak Ridge began to recede, replaced by a sense of calm and peace. Ivy Lee stood at the center of the light, her body glowing with a radiant energy. She had unleashed the ancient magic, the power of Oak Ridge, and she had defeated the figure in the woods. The battle was over. The darkness had been vanquished, and Oak Ridge was safe once more. The aftermath of the battle was a mixture of relief, exhaustion, and awe. The townspeople, battered but unbowed, surveyed the scene, their faces reflecting the intensity of the struggle. The square, once a battlefield, slowly returned to its former state. The shadows receded, the fog dissipated, and the stars reappeared in the clear night sky. A sense of peace settled over Oak Ridge, a tranquility that had been absent for far too long. The figure from the Whispering Woods was gone, its dark energy vanquished. The source of the evil had been defeated, and the threat to Oak Ridge had been neutralized. Ivy Lee stood at the center of the square, Snowball by her side, her body still glowing with a faint light. She had fulfilled her destiny as the child of silence. She had protected her town, and she had emerged victorious. The townspeople gathered around her, their faces filled with gratitude and admiration. They cheered her name, they praised her courage, and they celebrated her triumph. The elders approached her, their eyes filled with wisdom and respect. Mr. Harrison placed a hand on her shoulder, his voice filled with emotion. "You have saved us, Ivy Lee," he said gently. "You have shown us the true meaning of courage, the power of love, and the strength of the human spirit." Mrs. Gable stepped forward, her gaze filled with awe. "The prophecy has been fulfilled," she said softly. "The child of silence has risen, guided by the white cat, to restore balance and bring forth a new era of peace." Ivy Lee smiled, her heart overflowing with gratitude and humility. She had not sought to be a hero, but she had answered the call when her town needed her. And she had discovered a strength within herself that she never knew existed. Snowball purred contentedly, rubbing against Ivy Lee's legs, his presence a constant source of comfort and support. He had fought bravely by her side, his loyalty unwavering, his courage unmatched. As the night wore on, the townspeople began to disperse, returning to their homes, their hearts filled with relief and hope. The battle was over. But the memories of the struggle would remain, a reminder of the darkness they had faced and the victory they had achieved. Ivy Lee and her grandparents walked home together, their footsteps slow and weary. They were exhausted, but they were also filled with a sense of accomplishment. They had survived the battle, they had protected their town, and they had emerged stronger than ever. As they reached their house, Ivy Lee paused, turning back to look at the town square. The lights of Oak Ridge twinkled in the darkness, a beacon of hope and resilience. She knew that the town would never be the same. The events of the past few days had changed them all, had tested their strength, and had revealed the true depths of their community spirit. But she also knew that they had emerged from the darkness stronger, more united, and more determined to protect the light that shone within their town. With Snowball by her side, Ivy Lee stepped into her home, her heart filled with gratitude and hope for the future. The battle was over, but the journey had just begun, and she was ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead, knowing that with love, courage, and the magic of Oak Ridge, anything was possible. In the days and weeks that followed the battle, Oak Ridge entered a period of healing and rebuilding. The townspeople worked together, mending the damage, restoring their homes, and supporting each other through the aftermath of the conflict. The physical scars of the battle were gradually erased, but the emotional and spiritual wounds took longer to heal. The memory of the darkness, the fear, and the loss lingered in the hearts of the townspeople. Ivy Lee played a vital role in the healing process. She spent time with those who had been most deeply affected by the battle, offering comfort, support, and understanding. She listened to their stories, she shared her own experiences, and she helped them find strength and hope in the face of adversity. Snowball, too, provided solace and companionship. He seemed to possess an uncanny ability to sense sorrow and offer comfort. He would sit quietly with those who were grieving, his presence a silent source of reassurance. The elders organized community gatherings where the townspeople could share their feelings, express their fears, and celebrate their resilience. They held ceremonies to honor those who had been lost, to remember their courage, and to keep their memory alive. Slowly but surely, the spirit of Oak Ridge began to mend. Townspeople rediscovered their joy, their laughter, and their sense of community. They learned to appreciate the simple things in life, the beauty of nature, the warmth of friendship, and the power of love. One sunny afternoon, Ivy Lee visited the Whispering Woods, accompanied by Snowball. The forest, once a place of fear and darkness, now felt different. The air was cleaner, the light brighter, and the atmosphere calmer. Ivy Lee walked among the trees, her footsteps light and peaceful. She felt a connection to the woods, a sense of understanding and respect. She knew that the forest, like the town, had been wounded by the darkness, but it was now healing. Slowly, but surely, she reached the clearing where the final battle had taken place. The ground was still scarred, but new growth was emerging, green shoots pushing through the damaged earth. Ivy Lee sat down in the clearing, Snowball beside her, and closed her eyes. She listened to the sounds of the forest, the rustling of leaves, the chirping of birds, the gentle breeze. She felt a sense of peace wash over her, a tranquility that she had not experienced since before the darkness had descended upon Oak Ridge. She knew that the healing process would take time, but she also knew that the town and the forest would recover, stronger and more resilient than ever. As she sat there, reflecting on the events of the past few weeks, Ivy Lee realized how much she had changed. She had come to Oak Ridge as a silent, grieving child, but she had discovered her voice, her strength, and her purpose. She had learned the power of love, the importance of community, and the enduring magic that lay hidden within the heart of Oak Ridge. And she knew that these lessons would stay with her forever, guiding her path and shaping her future. Several months passed, and Oak Ridge gradually returned to its peaceful rhythm. The scars of the battle faded, replaced by a renewed sense of community and resilience. Ivy Lee continued to grow and thrive, her voice becoming stronger, her confidence blossoming. She remained close to Snowball, their bond deepening with each passing day. One crisp spring morning, as the town prepared for its annual spring festival, a stranger arrived in Oak Ridge. He was a tall, imposing man, with piercing blue eyes and a stern expression. He wore a long, dark coat that seemed out of place in the cheerful atmosphere of the town. The stranger made his way to the town hall, where the elders were busy organizing the festival. He introduced himself as Mr. Silas Blackwood, a historian from a neighboring town. He claimed to be interested in researching the history of Oak Ridge, particularly the legends and folklore. The elders, still wary after the recent events, greeted Mr. Blackwood with caution. They answered his questions politely, but kept their distance, sensing an air of mystery and unease about him. Ivy Lee, who was helping her grandparents prepare their booth for the festival, observed Mr. Blackwood from afar. She felt a strange sense of familiarity about him, as if she had seen him before, but she couldn't quite place where or when. Snowball, too, seemed disturbed by Mr. Blackwood's presence. He hissed and growled whenever the stranger came near, his fur bristling with hostility. As the spring festival got underway, Mr. Blackwood mingled with the crowd, asking questions, taking notes, and observing the townspeople. He seemed particularly interested in Ivy Lee and Snowball, his gaze lingering on them with an intensity that made Ivy Lee uncomfortable. One afternoon, Ivy Lee found Mr. Blackwood lurking near the Whispering Woods. He was examining the trees, his expression focused and determined. Ivy Lee felt a surge of unease. What was he doing here? What was he looking for? She approached him cautiously, Snowball by her side. "Can I help you, Mr. Blackwood?" she asked, her voice clear and strong. Mr. Blackwood turned, his blue eyes piercing. "Just admiring the scenery, my dear," he said, his voice smooth but cold. "These woods are quite fascinating, full of history and mystery." Ivy Lee frowned. "They can also be dangerous," she said, her gaze firm. "It's best to stay away." Mr. Blackwood chuckled, a dry and humorless sound. "Danger is relative, my dear. Some might say that the greatest danger lies hidden within the town itself." He turned and walked away, leaving Ivy Lee standing at the edge of the woods, her heart pounding with apprehension. She didn't trust Mr. Blackwood. She felt that he was hiding something, that his interest in Oak Ridge went beyond mere historical research, and she was determined to find out the truth no matter what it took. Ivy Lee's suspicions about Mr. Blackwood deepened with each passing day. She couldn't shake the feeling that he was hiding something, that his presence in Oak Ridge was more sinister than it seemed. She decided to investigate him further, to uncover the truth behind his mysterious demeanor and his unsettling interest in the town's legends. With Snowball by her side, Ivy Lee began to follow Mr. Blackwood, observing his movements and listening to his conversations. She discovered that he spent much of his time at the Oak Ridge Library, poring over old books and documents. She also learned that he had been asking the elders about the location of the ancient artifacts, the relics that held the key to Oak Ridge's magic and protection. Ivy Lee's heart pounded with apprehension. What was Mr. Blackwood planning? Why was he so interested in the town's secrets? And what connection did he have to the darkness that had threatened Oak Ridge months before? One evening, Ivy Lee followed Mr. Blackwood to the old bookshop, the dusty and forgotten place where she had discovered the legend of the white cats. The shop was closed, its windows dark and still. Ivy Lee watched as Mr. Blackwood tried the door. When it didn't open, he slipped around the back of the shop, disappearing into the shadows. Ivy Lee hesitated for a moment. Then, with Snowball leading the way, she followed him. She crept around the back of the shop and found a small window slightly ajar. With a boost from Snowball, Ivy Lee managed to climb through the window and slip inside. The shop was dark and silent, the air thick with the scent of old paper and leather. She moved cautiously through the aisles, her heart pounding with anticipation. Snowball padded silently beside her, his senses alert. Finally, she reached the back room, the place where the elderly woman had shown her the Book of Legends. Mr. Blackwood was there, his back to her, his hands running over the shelves. He was searching for something, his movements frantic and desperate. Ivy Lee could hear him muttering to himself, his voice low and urgent. "It has to be here," he whispered. "The key to their power, the source of their magic. I will not be denied." Ivy Lee's breath caught in her throat. She knew with a chilling certainty that Mr. Blackwood was not who he claimed to be. He was not a historian. He was a threat, a danger to Oak Ridge, and she had to stop him before it was too late. Ivy Lee stepped out of the shadows, her voice clear and strong. "What are you looking for, Mr. Blackwood?" she asked, her gaze unwavering. "What do you want with Oak Ridge's magic?" Mr. Blackwood whirled around, his blue eyes widening in surprise. He hadn't expected her to be there, to have followed him into the bookshop. "Ivy Lee," he said, his voice smooth but menacing. "You shouldn't be here. This is none of your concern." "It is my concern," Ivy Lee retorted, her voice filled with defiance. "I'm the child of silence, the protector of Oak Ridge, and I won't let you steal our magic," Snowball hissed, his white fur standing on end, his claws extended. He was ready to defend Ivy Lee, to fight for the town he had sworn to protect. Mr. Blackwood chuckled, a dry and humorless sound. "You think you can stop me, child? You and that mangy cat? You have no idea what you're up against." He raised his hand, and a dark energy erupted from his palm, swirling around him like a vortex of malice. Ivy Lee felt a chill run down her spine. This was the same dark energy that had threatened Oak Ridge before, the same force that she had fought to defeat. "I know exactly what I'm up against," Ivy Lee said, her voice firm. "I know your kind. You crave power, you thrive on darkness, and you seek to destroy everything that is good and pure." She raised her hand, and a white light emanated from her, fingertips pushing back the darkness, filling the room with a sense of hope and resilience. The battle began. Ivy Lee and Snowball fought with courage and determination, their light clashing against Mr. Blackwood's darkness. Ivy Lee wielded the knowledge she had gained from the old book, the ancient magic of Oak Ridge flowing through her veins. She chanted spells. She drew symbols in the air. She channeled the power of the earth. Snowball moved like a blur, his white fur a beacon in the gloom, his claws and teeth tearing through the dark energy. He fought with a ferocity that matched Mr. Blackwood's malice, protecting Ivy Lee and the bookshop with unwavering loyalty. Mr. Blackwood fought back with equal intensity, his dark energy lashing out, attempting to overwhelm Ivy Lee and Snowball. He summoned shadows from the corners of the room, their forms indistinct, their eyes glowing with an unholy light. The bookshop became a whirlwind of light and shadow, of courage and fear, of hope and despair. The fate of Oak Ridge hung in the balance, and the outcome of the battle rested on Ivy Lee's shoulders. As the battle reached its climax, Ivy Lee knew that she had to unleash the full power of the ancient magic, the force that lay dormant within Oak Ridge, waiting to be awakened. She raised her hand high above her head, her voice ringing out through the bookshop, her words ancient and powerful. The ground beneath her feet began to tremble. The air around her crackled with energy. A surge of light erupted from her body, a blinding white light that pushed back the darkness, illuminating the bookshop with an ethereal glow. Mr. Blackwood cried out in pain and surprise, his dark energy dissipating in the face of the overwhelming light. The shadows dissolved into nothingness, their power broken, their threat neutralized. The darkness that had threatened to consume the bookshop was vanquished, replaced by a sense of calm and peace. Ivy Lee stood at the center of the light, her body glowing with a radiant energy. She had unleashed the ancient magic, the power of Oak Ridge, and she had defeated Mr. Blackwood. The battle was over. The darkness had been vanquished, and the bookshop and Oak Ridge were safe once more. With Mr. Blackwood defeated, the darkness that had threatened Oak Ridge was finally vanquished. The old bookshop, like the town itself, was safe once more. Ivy Lee stood in the center of the room, Snowball by her side, her body still glowing with a faint light. She felt a sense of exhaustion, but also a deep sense of peace and accomplishment. The elderly woman who owned the bookshop emerged from a hidden doorway, her eyes wide with wonder and relief. "You've done it, child," she said softly, her voice trembling with emotion. "You've saved us all." Ivy Lee smiled, her heart filled with gratitude. "It wasn't just me," she said. "Snowball helped too, and the magic of Oak Ridge, it's stronger than any darkness." The woman nodded, her gaze resting on Snowball. "He's a special cat," she said, "a true guardian of this town." She turned to Ivy Lee, her expression serious. "But the danger is not entirely over. There is still much you don't know about Mr. Blackwood, about his true identity, and about his connection to the darkness." Ivy Lee frowned. "What do you mean?" she asked, her curiosity piqued. The woman hesitated for a moment, then she led Ivy Lee to a hidden compartment in the back wall. She opened it, revealing a small, intricately carved wooden box. "This box," she said, her voice hushed, "contains the truth about Mr. Blackwood, and the truth about the ancient magic of Oak Ridge. It is a story that has been hidden for centuries, a secret that must now be revealed." With trembling hands, she opened the box. Inside, there was a single object, a faded photograph. Ivy Lee carefully lifted it out and examined it. It was a picture of a young man, his face strikingly familiar. He had the same piercing blue eyes and stern expression as Mr. Blackwood. But there was something else, something that made Ivy Lee's breath catch in her throat. The young man was wearing a dark cloak, and around his neck he wore a necklace with a strange symbol, the same symbol that Ivy Lee had seen etched into the ground in the Whispering Woods. "Who is he?" Ivy Lee asked, her voice barely a whisper. The woman took a deep breath. "This," she said, "is Silas Blackwood, the first." Ivy Lee's eyes widened in shock and disbelief. The first Silas Blackwood? The man she had just defeated was a descendant, a successor to the darkness that had threatened Oak Ridge long ago. The woman nodded. "Centuries ago," she recounted, "the first Silas Blackwood came to Oak Ridge, seeking the same power, the same magic that his descendants sought. He was a sorcerer, a wielder of dark magic, and he sought to control the ancient forces that protected this town." She paused, her gaze filled with sadness. But the people of Oak Ridge, guided by the white cats and the child of silence of that time, rose up to defeat him. They banished him from the town and sealed away his dark magic. Ivy Lee's mind raced as she absorbed the information. The battle she had just fought was not just a random encounter, it was a continuation of an ancient struggle, a conflict between light and darkness that had been waged for generations, and she, the current child of silence, was destined to play a crucial role in this ongoing battle. "But why now?" she wrote, in her notebook, her handwriting filled with urgency. "Why did the darkness return after all these years?" The woman's expression grew solemn. "The darkness never truly leaves, child," she said. "It lies dormant, waiting for its chance to rise again, and sometimes it is drawn to those who seek power, those who are willing to unleash its destructive force." She looked at Ivy Lee, her eyes filled with a mixture of hope and warning. "You have defeated Silas Blackwood, but the darkness remains. You must be vigilant, child. You must be prepared to face whatever challenges lie ahead." Ivy Lee nodded, her determination unwavering. She knew that her journey was far from over, that the fight for Oak Ridge would continue, but she also knew that she was not alone. She had Snowball, her loyal companion, the magic of Oak Ridge, and the wisdom of the elders to guide her. And she had the courage to face whatever darkness may come, to protect her town, and to fulfill her destiny as the child of silence. The revelation of Silas Blackwood's true identity and the history of the ancient struggle between light and darkness in Oak Ridge cast a long shadow over the town. The people of Oak Ridge realized that their peaceful existence was fragile, that the darkness could return at any time. But they also realized that they were not powerless. They had the magic of Oak Ridge, the wisdom of the elders, and the courage of the child of silence and the white cat to protect them. Ivy Lee, now a young woman, dedicated her life to safeguarding Oak Ridge. She studied the ancient lore, she honed her magical abilities, and she trained the next generation of protectors. Snowball remained by her side, his white fur never fading, his amber eyes never losing their wisdom. He became a symbol of hope and resilience, a reminder of the enduring power of good. The elders continued to guide the town, their wisdom and experience invaluable in maintaining balance and harmony. They established a council of guardians, a group of dedicated individuals responsible for protecting Oak Ridge from any threat, both internal and external. The old bookshop became a center of knowledge and learning, a place where the history of Oak Ridge was preserved and shared. The elderly woman, its keeper, passed down her wisdom to her successors, ensuring that the secrets of the past would never be forgotten. And the Whispering Woods, once a place of fear and darkness, gradually transformed into a sanctuary of peace and tranquility. The trees grew taller and stronger, the air became cleaner and fresher, and the forest thrived under the watchful eyes of the guardians. Generations came and went, but the legacy of Oak Ridge endured. The stories of the white cats, the children, of silence, and the battles against the darkness were passed down from parents to children, from elders to young ones. The town remained a beacon of light in a world often shrouded in darkness. Its people lived in harmony with nature, respecting the ancient magic that flowed through their land. And they were always prepared to defend their home, to protect their community, and to stand against any threat that dared to challenge their peace. One autumn evening, as the leaves turned vibrant colours and the wind carried the scent of wood smoke, Ivy Lee stood on the steps of the town hall, observing the bustling activity of the town square. She was no longer the silent child who had arrived in Oak Ridge years ago. She was a strong and confident woman, a protector of her people, a guardian of their magic. Snowball, his fur still as white as snow, his eyes still as wise as ever, stood beside her, his presence a comforting reassurance. Ivy Lee smiled, her heart filled with gratitude and hope. She knew that the journey had been long and arduous, filled with challenges and sacrifices, but she also knew that it had been worth it. She had found her voice, she had discovered her purpose, and she had helped to create a future where the light would always triumph over the darkness. As she looked at the people of Oak Ridge, their faces filled with joy and laughter, she knew that the legacy of their town would endure, a testament to the enduring power of love, courage, and the magic that lay hidden within their hearts. And she knew that as long as there were white cats to guide them and children of silence to protect them, Oak Ridge would forever remain a beacon of hope, a sanctuary of peace, and a testament to the enduring strength of the human spirit. The end.